If you are anything like me, you might have a slight propensity to see a problem and then extrapolate a bunch of other little problems out of it. So I'm going to do a video today on ways of just dealing with a problem. This is a very broad video. As an attorney, every day, all day, people come to me with problems. They have a lot of anxiety about the problem. I, being someone who, gets anxious about things, have to calm my client down. And I realized I have to do this for myself. Like sometimes, I don't know if this happens to you, but I'm very good at kind of calming other people down about their problems, but sometimes I struggle calming myself down. I can be a great support to someone else, but to me, I might melt. I have done this and I do try to implement it myself for things that overwhelm me when it comes to problems. And I don't know where I heard this from. Maybe it was an old boss, but he said, not everything is a fire. And to this day, I think about that line and I use it. Not everything is a fire. And one thing about dealing with problems is you have to identify what's a fire and what's not a fire. Sometimes there's fire, sometimes there's huge problems. And I'm saying not a legit fire. I hope no one's dealing with legit, although I have to deal with fires. Weirdly enough, more often than I thought I would ever deal with fires. But sometimes I have to deal with, fires that have happened and the aftermath of that. But what I'm talking about is proverbial fires. Not everything is the world is not crashing down. Sometimes it's gonna be okay. And what I try to get clients to focus on, if there's something they're really freaked out about, is define the problem. Before we go into all of the 1,000 things that could happen, because now that there's a problem, those are not yet problems. They're potential problems, but they're not yet problems. And I have had it where I've kept myself up late at night worrying about things that have not happened, but could. And so that's not a good use of anyone's time. Isolate what is the core issue. What is the core problem? And that might require you to sit down and write it out, or really think about it. But define what is that issue? What do we really have to worry about? We don't have to worry about, violation down the line. We don't have to worry about, getting sued. We don't have to worry about losing money necessarily. We don't have those are all things we worry about down. First, let's worry about what is the issue? I can frame it from a landlord perspective. The unit, there's been, a plumbing leak. Okay, that's the problem. That, there's a plumbing leak in the unit. Okay, not that thing over there, not that thing over there, not that, there's a plumbing leak. So the first and foremost thing is we got to address the plumbing leak. So the second part of now that you've isolated the problem is define, the source of the problem. So is the problem something internal? Maybe there was a breakdown in communication. Maybe there's a breakdown with the vendor. Maybe you miscommunicated something to your staff. Maybe it's something that you could control. Maybe it's something completely out of your control. But try to figure out what was the source of the problem. And a lot of times, that helps when you might have a problem that stems from another problem. How did that get there? But it's good to figure out where did the problem come from me? Did it come from my end, or did it come from someone else's end? So then you can figure out where you're gonna start addressing things from. Okay, maybe we have to go talk to them. If it's internal, I gotta go talk to the staff and see what went wrong over here. What did they do? The third thing is you wanna break down a solution. So if you have this problem and I'm just gonna use this example because plumbing problems are just a common thing. But I feel if you hear this example, it would apply to anybody. The pipe has burst. It burst in the wall and there's a flooding issue. First and foremost, you gotta send a plumber to go handle the thing. Probably to turn off the water, but you send an emergency plumber. First thing they're probably gonna do is handle it, but you send the plumber. How they handle it, they know how to do it. That's why they're a plumber. That's why you're not a plumber. They're the plumber. You send the plumber. Then from there, you talk to the plumber. What's going on? Here's the things that went wrong. The plumber is probably going to know the action plan. These are all the things that are happening. If it's a tenant-occupied unit, the tenant's probably calling you, hey, the pipe has burst. Tell the tenant to get out because it's probably not going to be safe because there's going to be a bunch of water, and that you're sending the plumber. Tenant will be out. Send the plumber. Once you figure out from the plumber what's going on, let the tenant know. So this whole thing of break down the solution, it's going to be probably in multiple parts. because a lot of things are moving at the same time. So it's going to take the plumber time to get there and drive. Tenant's not going to know what's going on, but quite frankly, neither are you. You don't know. And unless you intentionally burst the pipe, which I highly doubt you did because that's an expensive thing to intentionally do to yourself, you have no idea. But once you have some sort of idea of how things, can be fixed, and the plumber, the person that you send out, the vendor, they're going to have an idea of what could be done. And this is going to have to happen. It's going to take time. I can't do it today. I'm going to have to come back tomorrow. I'm going to have to get the parts. I'm going to need, my team, blah, blah, blah. Okay. How long do you think it's going to take? Well, I don't know. If you've seen this before, how long has it taken? It's taken 2 days to fix. Okay. Can the tenant stay in the unit? No. There's water everywhere. And then we're going to have to, maybe do some remediation. We're going to have to air out the unit. We're going to have to do this testing. We're going to do that. Okay. So then you communicate with the tenant. But all of those things are steps. And so surprisingly, we have a lot of common sense. So when you have some sort of issue, have some problem, you can probably figure out what's going to happen. I'm going to have to send the plumber, probably going to be bad. Things are probably going to have to get fixed. I'm probably going to have to tell the tenant. The tenant's probably going to have to go somewhere else temporarily. And you work on that. You don't necessarily worry about the long term. The tenant's going to be angry. You're going to have a housing case. You're going to get sued. You don't worry about all those things. You can't worry about all those things. They could happen very well, but you don't worry about that. You worry about this has to get fixed. Tenant's not going to be able to be there. Tenant's going to have to go somewhere else. And then you communicate with the tenant and you let the tenant know what's going on. And a lot of the times tenants completely understand and they just want to be communicated with. And then if things change, you keep going back. Okay, this is what's going on. This is what's going to happen. And then you let the tenant know. And then you just keep making progress. And you keep informing people who you need to inform of what's going on. And eventually it'll be done. That is, I think, the breaking down of the solution is, I think, the hardest part for landlords. And it's the hardest part kind of for me, because you see something and you go like, there's so many things that are going to be done, but you have to take it like one step at a time. Like, okay, we sent the plumber. And while the plumber's like driving over, like you just can't be worried much further, because like that's all you can do. It's like you sent the guy will get there when he gets there. If he's in LA, everything is like 20 minutes away from everything, according to Cher Horowitz and Clueless. So it's, take at least 20 minutes before you hear anything back from the plumber. You can't hyperventilate during every step. You break down the solution. Okay, I sent the plumber, this is going to happen, and then you just keep making progress, because eventually this thing is going to get fixed. Spend a lot of time on that step. That's the step that trips us all up. Like, just keep working at the solution and don't worry about all of the 1,000 things that are coming your way. Like, just everything's going to be okay. Then you want to set timelines. This is a thing I've implemented more and more over the years, because I see it's super important. You have to give people timelines, like especially vendors. I need this done by here. We'll do the best they can. If you kind of give them a deadline, they'll probably adhere to the deadline. If you don't give them a deadline, they're like, what? Just do what I can do. Like, no, you need to give people deadlines. I give people deadlines all of the time. You have until this day to get back to me. And people, like probably about 80% of the time, will make contact with you. They might not adhere to the deadline, but they'll definitely try to, or by the deadline will communicate some sort of update to you. So deadlines are important, always. Give people deadlines. Everybody. You have until this time on this day to get back to me. Then the other one is having a backup plan. Now, backup plan is kind of elusive because it's really hard to figure out a backup plan is to like a problem. One way you can have a backup plan is more like having backup options, which is having alternatives. So in like the world of property management, you want to have a few vendors on deck. So if you want like 2 to 3 plumbers, because if one plumber is caught up in an emergency, and if they're a good plumber, they probably have other clients, then you might want to have another 1 or 2 vendors, 1 or 2 plumbers that can go out. And if not, then there's Google. Having a backup plan is always helps. And I couldn't really tell you what a backup plan would be. For my plumbing example, the backup plan might be the tenant temporarily relocates to a vacant unit on site. If there's not one, the backup plan would be the tenant stays in a hotel nearby. You have 2 options. If you think that the thing's gonna take 2 days, a backup plan in your head would be account for 5 days. So then you have contingency money. Backup plans might also just be backup budgets. Like just, if you budget this, add extra for just in case. But having backup plans more so, I think, comes from like anticipating things. Just, finding more vendors. Like if your, plumber is busy, maybe look for another plumber, reach out to other contacts. Hey, do you have a good plumber, etc. You should have a backup plan. Defining backup plans, very tricky in a broad sense. But I think a lot of people in a problem, they go with, here's the solution that's going to be the cheapest, most economical, and maybe the fastest. That's the one you go with. But the backup plan is, well, we can do this. It's going to be more time consuming or more expensive. That also could be an option. And then here's another, potential avenue. So those are always backup plans. People tend to go with, because it makes sense, the cheapest and fastest, but maybe that's an alternative to another one, or anticipate another more expensive and time consuming one, but that might be the better, more efficient way to go about it, might be the safest one. So just, keep in mind that you might have to revert to a backup plan, and you might have to come up with a backup plan on the fly, and that's okay. I said this earlier, but I'm also going to re-highlight it. Communicate what's going on to who you need to communicate it to. You don't need to communicate to everybody, but communicate to the key players. That's also another thing. Isolate who really needs to know. You don't, if you have a whole office, you might not need the whole office knowing. You might just need one person, hey, this is going on, you're going to be the point of contact. Let the tenant know. That way you don't have to inform 5,000 people. Or another one I like, extrapolate yourself. Delegate it. You handle this, you know what to do, you contact the vendor. When you get updates from the vendor, you contact the tenant. Same thing in a business. You contact the vendor. When you get updates, you contact the customer. It's one less person that things have to go through and potentially bottleneck at. Oh, well, I told them. Well, you didn't tell me. Try it, if you're a boss or a property owner and you have a property manager, or you have, managers or staff, you want to remove yourself, because a lot of times you're the bottleneck because you have someone there to do it. And that person communicate. And the fewer people that need to communicate, the less things that get lost in translation. And then the last thing, just be flexible. Flexibility is more so just having patience with yourself in the process. Things might not go according to plan, and that's okay, but don't feel defeated by it. And mostly don't let that overwhelm you. You as a business owner, you as a property owner, your intentions by and large are, you have something that you want to go, through some sort of flow. You want your building, you want, the money to come in, the bills to get paid, and want to really hear nothing. That's not always going to be the case. Same thing with a business. And so there's going to be times where things aren't going to go according to plan. You're going to have to spend more money than you wanted to. You're going to have to appease more people than you wanted to. You're going to have to save face, do customer service, all of these things. And you have to be flexible with that, but you also have to be really, really patient with yourself. And I find that landlords and business owners make really bad decisions when they're not patient with themselves. When they get really, really anxious about the process, they want to create some sort of rapid solution that often can get them in trouble. Being overly accommodating could set you into a trap. So if it takes time, and let's say something comes up and you don't have a backup plan yet and you're working on it, or you don't have an answer, it's okay to say you don't know. That's fine. And I have to think about it. I have to revisit. I got to figure out what's going on. I'll get back to you. And it's okay that you don't have all the answers all the time, because nobody does. You don't have a crystal ball. You're not a soothsayer. You're not a fortune teller. So again, not everything is going to be a fire, and not everything is going to go according to plan. But the best thing for your own mental health is, if something's overwhelming you, to maybe step away from it. And I have to tell myself this all of the time, which is I can't do this right now. Or I don't have a solution, and I don't have enough information to not make a decision based on my anxiety and fears right now. So I'm going to have to step back and revisit this. Maybe in 10 minutes, maybe an hour, maybe tomorrow, depending on the urgency. So those are kind of the things when it comes to problem solving. There's not here's a template, here's a formula. It's more so, don't let the problem overwhelm you, and don't let it be bigger than it is. And if you have people to help you, then delegate and make sure that things are getting communicated. So if you have a problem, that comes up, learn from that problem and maybe create a system from it. So then in the future, if something like that happens again, something similar, you go, hey, here's how we handle it. And it'll greatly alleviate your stress, because problems, a lot of them, if you were to take them, they have the same components and they're systematic and they're redundant. So electrical problem here, or a plumbing problem there, or a mad customer here and a lot of the times they have a lot of similarities, and it's just a process, and you can replicate it. And if you had a problem and it really overwhelmed you and it's done now, it sounds like cheesy, but reflect on it and write like, how did we handle that? And what were the things that made it really hard? And how can we improve upon that? And what was our lead time? And what was our communication time? And could we make it better? And, you know, now that we know how these things work, what would we do that would shortcut and make it faster? And so that's my walk away from, you know, the problem solving thing is don't let it overwhelm you. I mean, it might. I can't stop you from that. You might not even be able to stop you from that. But it's ultimately almost everything's going to be okay. If you like this video, you might also like my video on handling tenant disputes, or in another way, avoiding tenant blowouts. I also have a weekly newsletter that has a lot of updates on news and very helpful information and tips for landlords that I send out every Sunday. It's free. There's a link to that below. Feel free to subscribe. I would love it if you did. And I will see you in the next one.